The silent visitor. The sea stretched endlessly, a silken expanse shimmering under the fading light of a golden sunset. Edgar Edge Cale leaned back in his creaky fishing boat, his boots propped against the edge of the bow. The boat, rusted and weathered like its owner, rocked gently with the rhythm of the waves. It wasn't much, but it was his sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the world couldn't reach him. Or so he thought. Edge cast his line into the tranquil waters, not really caring if he caught anything. He wasn't here for the fish. This was his escape. From the noise, from the years spent repairing starships bound for wars he wanted no part of, from the never-ending grind of human ambition. Out here, it was just him and the sea, two old souls sharing a quiet understanding. But the sea wasn't quiet tonight. A peculiar hum tickled the edge of his hearing. At first, it was faint, almost like the vibration of a distant engine, but it grew steadily louder, reverberating through the hull of his boat. Edge sat up, his brow furrowed. The sound wasn't coming from the water, it was coming from above. He squinted at the horizon, expecting to see an aircraft or perhaps a passing drone. Instead, the sky itself seemed to ripple, the faint stars distorted as though seen through heat waves. Then it appeared, a shadow, vast and menacing, blotting out the sky above him. Edge's breath caught. The object was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its surface was sleek and seamless, reflecting the dying light of the sun in shifting patterns. It hovered silently, its size dwarfing his tiny boat. It wasn't the craft's form that unnerved him. It was its silence, the way it moved without a single sound except for that deep, resonant hum. The fisherman in Edge wanted to run. The technician in him wanted to understand. He stood slowly, his weathered hands gripping the edges of the boat to steady himself. "What in the hell are you?" he muttered under his breath, as though speaking to a wild animal that might bolt if startled. The craft responded. From its underside, a panel slid open with mechanical precision, revealing a pulsating sphere of light. The glow intensified, illuminating the water in an eerie orange hue. Before Edge could react, a beam shot down, enveloping his boat in a column of energy. "Damn it, not today." Edge growled, clutching the sides of the boat as it began to lift off the water. The beam carried him higher and higher, the sea shrinking into a dark, restless smear below. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hand stayed steady, gripping the old boat with the determination of a man who had stared down worse odds. The craft pulled him inside, the transition from open air to the belly of the ship so seamless it felt like stepping through a doorway. Gravity returned with a thud as his boat settled on a polished metallic floor. Edge's boots echoed loudly as he stood, his eyes darting around the alien chamber. The walls curved endlessly, their surfaces glowing faintly as if alive. The air smelled clean, too clean, like it had been scrubbed of every impurity. "Welcome aboard," a voice said, breaking the silence. It was calm and measured, yet it seemed to vibrate in his skull more than his ears. Edge froze. "All right, who's there?" he demanded, his voice gruff and unwavering despite the circumstances. "If this is some high-tech prank, I'll have you know I'm not in the mood." No response came, only a faint whirring noise as a small spherical drone floated into view. Its surface shimmered with holographic patterns, and a single blue light at its center fixed on him like an unblinking eye. "You have been chosen," the voice continued, emanating from the drone this time. "Your knowledge and resilience are required." Edge crossed his arms, his grizzled face twisting into a scowl. "Chosen for what?" "Fishing tips. I'm retired." "Pick someone else." The drone paused, as if considering his words. Then the walls around him shifted, panels sliding away to reveal vast windows. Beyond them, the earth hung in the void, a fragile blue gem against the infinite black. "This is not a request," the voice said. "Humanity's survival depends on it." Edge stared out at the planet below, his mind racing. Whatever this was, it was bigger than him, bigger than fishing, bigger than retirement. And in that moment, The quiet life he had sought so desperately seemed impossibly far away. Well, he muttered to himself, so much for a peaceful vacation. The drone hovered closer, its light pulsing softly as if waiting for his response. Edge sighed, his resolve hardening. All right, let's hear it. What's the job? The chamber shifted again, a doorway opening to reveal a corridor filled with pulsing lights and incomprehensible machinery. The voice spoke one last time, its tone both commanding and oddly reassuring. Follow the path, Edgar Cale. The galaxy awaits. With a resigned shake of his head, Edge stepped forward, leaving his boat and his old life behind. A mission written in the stars. The corridor stretched endlessly before Edge, its glowing walls pulsing with a rhythm that felt eerily alive. He walked cautiously, his boots clanging softly against the metallic floor. His instincts, honed from years of working with machines that didn't forgive mistakes, told him this place wasn't designed by human hands. Every surface gleamed with a precision that defied imperfection, and the faint hum of unseen energy filled the air, tickling his senses like static before a storm. This had better not be some intergalactic pyramid scheme, he muttered, his voice echoing faintly. The drone floated just ahead of him, its light occasionally flickering in patterns that Edge couldn't decipher. He resisted the urge to swat at it like a mosquito. Whatever was going on, this floating flashlight was the closest thing to an ally he had. The corridor ended abruptly, opening into a vast chamber that took his breath away. The room was a dome, its ceiling an enormous translucent expanse revealing the stars beyond. Constellations Edge didn't recognize glittered against the black void, their light refracted through the thin layer of atmosphere still clinging to the craft. In the center of the chamber stood a console that pulsed with the same rhythmic glow as the walls. The drone floated to the console and paused. "Step forward," the voice commanded. Edge hesitated. "Look, before I start pressing buttons on some alien gadget, maybe you could explain a thing or two. Like why you dragged me out of my peaceful fishing trip." "You were chosen for your expertise," the voice replied, calm and infuriatingly vague. "Your knowledge of machinery and adaptability under pressure make you ideal for this mission." Edge snorted. "You've got the wrong guy. I'm a mechanic, not a hero." The console responded before the voice did. Its surface shimmered, forming a three-dimensional projection of a star map. Bright points of light connected by glowing lines revealed a network of star systems, each marked with symbols Edge couldn't read. One system at the map's edge glowed brighter than the others, its light flickering urgently. "That," the voice said, its tone now grave, "is Aetheris, a key system for interstellar stability. Its people are under siege." Edge frowned. "Stability? Siege? What's that got to do with me?" The projection shifted, zooming in on the highlighted system. A planet came into view, its surface dotted with sprawling cities and vast oceans. But something was wrong. Shadows moved across its surface, massive, writhing shapes that blotted out the light like living storms. "They are called the Null," the voice explained. "An ancient force of entropy that consumes and dismantles. They spread like a plague, leaving nothing but ruin in their wake." Edge crossed his arms, skeptical. "And you think I can stop them? I don't even have a toolbox." The drone whirred, as if amused. "Your skills go beyond tools. You are human, a species renowned for resilience, innovation, and unconventional solutions. We need your ingenuity." Edge tilted his head, chewing over the words. He had been called many things in his life: stubborn, reckless, resourceful, but never a savior. "What's your angle in all this?" he asked. "Why pick a washed-up mechanic when you've got a whole galaxy to choose from?" The voice softened. "We are the Concord, a collective of advanced civilizations united to protect the balance of the cosmos. Our strength lies in our unity, but the Null defy all logic and reason. Their chaos is unpredictable, and we require perspectives outside our understanding. Humanity's unique thinking may be the key to countering them." Edge sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Great. No pressure. Ha. The projection shifted again, this time focusing on a fleet of Concorde ships stationed near the Atheris system. Sleek and formidable, the vessels were locked in a desperate standoff against the encroaching null forces. Even from the hologram, the tension was palpable. "You will not face this challenge alone," the voice assured him. "You will be briefed further by Captain Iridia when you arrive. She leads the Concorde fleet." "Captain, huh?" Edge smirked. "Sounds like someone who's not gonna like taking advice from a guy who smells like fish." The drone's light pulsed in a rhythm that felt almost like a chuckle. "Proceed to the docking bay. Your transport awaits." The chamber shifted around him, panels sliding seamlessly into place to reveal a new corridor. Edge took a deep breath. This wasn't what he had signed up for when he pushed off from shore that morning. But then again, when had life ever gone according to plan? As he stepped into the corridor, he glanced back at the star map. The glowing planet of Atheris seemed to shimmer with expectation, as though it knew what lay ahead. Edge squared his shoulders and muttered to himself, "Let's see if this old dog still has some tricks." The path ahead lit up with a soft glow, guiding him toward his next step. Edge followed it, the faint hum of the ship resonating like a heartbeat in his chest. Somewhere in the vastness of space, a battle for survival was unfolding, and for reasons he couldn't quite grasp, he had been called to the front lines. And for better or worse, Edge Kale was on his way. The reluctant vanguard. The docking bay was a cavernous space of shimmering metal and alien ingenuity, a place where functionality met the sublime. Ships of all shapes and sizes rested in silent readiness, their surfaces glowing faintly under the bay's soft, ambient light. Edge stepped through the threshold, his boots echoing on the polished floor. His gaze darted around, trying to make sense of the vast array of technology before him. At the center of the bay, a sleek, angular vessel stood out among the others. It was smaller than the massive cruisers surrounding it, but exuded an aura of precision and speed. Its hull gleamed in deep hues of blue and silver, its edges sharp and purposeful. Edge couldn't help but feel a pang of admiration. Whoever had designed this ship had done so with love. The drone hovered beside him, its light flickering in what Edge was beginning to recognize as its way of drawing attention. "This is the Aegis Runner," the voice said, "a scout-class vessel equipped with advanced stealth and navigation capabilities. She will serve as your transport to Atheris." Edge raised an eyebrow. "She? You're telling me this thing's got a personality?" The drone emitted a soft hum that might have been laughter. "Her systems are fully integrated with Concorde I protocols, optimized for intuitive operation. You may find her responsive." Edge stepped closer to the Aegis Runner, running his hand along its smooth surface. The metal was warm to the touch, almost alive. "Responsive, huh? Let's hope she doesn't mind an old mechanic poking around." The ship's boarding ramp extended gracefully, a gesture that felt almost inviting. Edge climbed aboard, his curiosity battling with lingering doubts. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior: sleek consoles, glowing interfaces, and a cockpit that seemed to wrap around him like the embrace of a trusted companion. "Welcome aboard," a voice greeted him, soft and distinctly feminine. It wasn't the monotone drone voice from earlier, but something warmer, more human. Edge paused, momentarily taken aback. "And you are?" he asked, settling into the pilot's seat. "I am the Aegis Runner," the voice replied. "But you may call me Aegis. I am here to assist you in any way necessary." Edge chuckled, shaking his head. "Great. I'm talking to a ship now. Next thing you know, I'll be having tea with the engine." The ship hummed softly, as if amused. "Captain Iridia is awaiting your arrival. Shall we begin our journey?" "Hold on," Edge said, leaning back in the chair. "Before we go anywhere, let's get one thing straight. I don't know what you or this Concorde sees in me, but I'm just a guy who used to fix things. I'm not a soldier, not a hero. If you're looking for someone to save the galaxy, you might have picked the wrong guy." There was a brief pause, and then Aegis responded, her tone calm and measured. Sometimes, those who repair are the ones who save. Destruction is easy. Restoration requires skill, patience, and understanding. Your perspective may be exactly what is needed. Edge sat silently for a moment, letting her words sink in. He wasn't sure if the ship was programmed to say that, or if it was genuine, but either way, it struck a chord. "All right," he said finally, "but don't say I didn't warn you." The console in front of him lit up, and the hum of the ship deepened as the engines powered on. The docking bay's massive doors slid open, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond. Stars glimmered like scattered jewels, and the faint glow of a distant nebula painted the horizon in hues of green and gold. "Engaging hyperdrive," Aegis announced. "Destination: Etheris." Edge gripped the controls as the ship surged forward, the stars stretching into streaks of light as the Aegis runner tore through space. The sensation was exhilarating, a rush that made his heart race despite himself. For the first time in years, Edge felt alive, not just surviving, but truly living. As they hurtled through the void, Aegis spoke again, her tone more somber. "Before we arrive, there is something you should know. The Concord fleet is holding the line, but they cannot do so indefinitely. Captain Iridia believes you may offer a solution they cannot see." Edge frowned, his fingers tightening on the controls. "And what if I don't? What if I get there and realize I'm just as clueless as they are?" "Then you will do what humans have always done," Aegis replied. "Adapt, innovate, survive." The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a jolt, and the scene before them stole Edge's breath. The Etheris system was a war zone. Ships clashed in a deadly ballet of light and shadow, their weapons cutting through the darkness like blades. The Null were unlike anything Edge had imagined. Shapeless, ever-shifting masses of black and crimson that seemed to devour everything they touched. Edge swallowed hard. "So, that's the enemy." "Yes," Aegis confirmed. "And this is the fight you've been brought into." Edge stared at the chaos, his mind racing. He didn't have a plan, didn't have answers. All he had was his wits, his experience, and a ship that seemed to believe in him more than he believed in himself. "Well," he muttered, gripping the controls tightly, "let's see what this old dog can do." With that, the Aegis runner surged forward, diving headfirst into the battle that would define the fate of a galaxy. Into the heart of chaos. The battlefield unfolded like a living nightmare. The Aegis runner streaked into the fray, its sleek frame weaving through the chaos with unsettling precision. Edge gripped the controls, his jaw clenched as he dodged debris and stray energy blasts that lit up the void. The Null were unlike any enemy he'd ever imagined. Dark, swirling masses that seemed to defy the laws of physics, shifting and morphing as they absorbed and obliterated everything in their path. "This is a bad idea," Edge muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. "It's the only idea," Aegis replied calmly, her voice filling the cockpit like a steady hand on his shoulder. "The Concord fleet is depending on us to breach their defenses and deliver the data to Captain Iridia." Edge winced as a massive Null tendril lashed out, grazing a Concord cruiser just ahead. The ship erupted into flames, spinning helplessly before its remnants were swallowed by the encroaching darkness. "They're dropping like flies out here," Edge barked. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" "Patch up a galaxy-wide problem with duct tape and hope." Aegis didn't respond immediately, her silence almost reassuring in its deliberation. Then her voice returned, measured but firm. "You've faced impossible odds before, Edge. You know how to think beyond the obvious. That's why you're here." Edge shook his head, grumbling. "Yeah, well, you better hope I haven't lost my touch." Ahead, a Concord battleship was engaged in a desperate standoff against a Null entity that dwarfed it in size. The alien mass writhed and pulsed, its dark tendrils reaching out like grasping claws. Despite the battleship's best efforts, its energy shields flickered, dangerously close to collapse. "Edge, we have incoming data from the Concord fleet," Aegis interrupted, her tone urgent. Iridia's command ship is requesting immediate assistance. The Null are attempting to sever their network link. Great, Edge muttered, jerking the controls to avoid a spiraling piece of debris. Where's her ship? Aegis brought up a holographic display, pinpointing a massive Concorde dreadnought surrounded by smaller defensive vessels. The Null had swarmed the formation, their chaotic movements seemingly random yet horrifyingly effective. That's her, Edge asked, eyebrows raising. Biggest ship in the fight, and she's the one calling for help. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Her ship is the nerve center of the fleet, Aegis explained. If it falls, the rest of the Concorde forces will lose coordination. Edge exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening around the controls. No pressure, huh? The Aegis runner surged forward, darting through the maelstrom with almost uncanny precision. As they neared Iridia's dreadnought, Edge caught sight of the captain herself on a massive holographic display projected across the main hull. Her steely gaze and sharp features matched the intensity of the battle around her. She was barking orders, her voice calm but commanding. Captain Iridia to all units, her voice boomed, crackling slightly through the comms. Hold your positions and maintain formation. We cannot allow the Null to breach. Her words were cut short as a Null tendril smashed into the side of her ship, sending a cascade of sparks and debris spiraling into the void. The dreadnought shuddered but held firm, its energy shields barely managing to contain the blow. Aegis, patch me through to her, Edge demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. A moment later, Iridia's image appeared on a smaller console inside the cockpit. Her piercing green eyes locked onto him immediately. Who are you? She snapped. This is a restricted channel. Name's Edge Kale, he replied, his tone gruff. The Concorde thought it'd be fun to drop me into this mess. I hear you've got a Null problem. Iridia's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. A mix of skepticism and recognition. You're the mechanic. The one they said might have a solution. Ed shrugged, the ship banking hard to avoid another tendril. Don't get your hopes up. I'm still working on that part. Then work faster, Iridia shot back. We're barely holding the line. Aegis cut in before Edge could respond. Captain, if we can access the core systems of your dreadnought, we may be able to amplify its energy field to repel the Null. Iridia's eyes narrowed. That's a long shot. Edge smirked. Long shots are kind of my specialty. Just tell your crew not to shoot me on the way in. Fine, Iridia said after a tense pause. Dock at the lower bay. And Kel, don't waste my time. The connection ended, and Edge let out a low whistle. Charming lady. She is focused, Aegis replied. You would do well to follow her lead. The Aegis runner approached the dreadnought, weaving through the defensive line. As they neared the docking bay, Edge couldn't shake the weight of what was coming. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't a leader. But as the Null's relentless advance loomed larger, he realized something unsettling. He was all they had. The docking bay loomed ahead, and the Aegis runner slipped inside, its engines powering down with a soft hum. Edge took a deep breath, his hand steady despite the chaos swirling in his mind. All right, Aegis, he muttered. Let's see if we can pull a miracle out of thin air. The ship's hatch opened, revealing the tense faces of Concorde soldiers waiting for him. Edge stepped out, the faint hum of battle vibrating through the floor beneath his boots. And with that, the reluctant mechanic took his first step into the fight for the galaxy's survival. Into the belly of the beast. The docking bay of the dreadnought was a hive of controlled chaos. Sparks flew as engineers scrambled to repair damaged systems, and the sharp bark of commands echoed through the cavernous space. Edge stepped off the Aegis runner, his boots clicking against the polished deck. He was greeted by the grim stares of Concorde soldiers, their faces a mix of exhaustion and resolve. A tall figure strode toward him, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Captain Iridia was every bit as imposing in person as she had been on the hologram. Her uniform was crisp despite the battle raging outside, and her sharp green eyes appraised Edge with a mixture of skepticism and urgency. "Your call?" she asked, her tone clipped. "Depends," Edge replied, crossing his arms. "If this goes south, I might deny everything." Iridia didn't smile. "We don't have time for jokes. Follow me." She turned sharply, and Edge followed, weaving through the bustling crew. The air was thick with tension, and the occasional shudder of the ship reminded everyone of the relentless enemy outside. Iridia led him to a secure room where a holographic display dominated the center. The null forces swirled like a malevolent storm, encircling the Concorde fleet. "This is the situation," Iridia began, gesturing to the display. "The null are targeting our neural link systems. If they sever them, our fleet coordination will collapse, and they'll tear us apart." Edge studied the map, his mind racing. "And you brought me here too. What? Duct tape your systems back together." Iridia's gaze hardened. "The Concorde believes you can think in ways our analysts cannot. The null's tactics are chaotic, their movements unpredictable. We need someone who can adapt on the fly." Edge sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "All right, let's start with the obvious. How are your energy shields holding up?" "Barely," Iridia admitted. "They're designed to withstand physical and energy-based attacks, but the null's essence isn't just physical. It's corrosive. They erode everything they touch." Edge's mind clicked into problem-solving mode, a familiar rhythm he hadn't felt in years. He pointed to the hologram. "What if we amplify the shield harmonics? Boost their frequency to disrupt whatever field the null are using to break through." Iridia frowned. "That would require more energy than we have. The generators are already maxed out." "Not if we siphon power from non-essential systems," Edge countered. "Your weapon systems are doing squat against those things anyway. Reroute the energy and focus on defense." Iridia stared at him for a moment before nodding. "It's risky, but it might work. I'll have my engineers." Edge held up a hand. "No time for that. I'll do it myself." Before Iridia could protest, another shudder rocked the ship, this one stronger than before. The lights flickered, and alarms blared throughout the room. A technician rushed in, his face pale. "Captain, the null are breaching the outer shields." Iridia's jaw tightened. She turned to Edge. "You've got 10 minutes. Don't waste it." Edge nodded and followed the technician out of the room, his heart pounding. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the dreadnought, the air thick with urgency. When they reached the generator room, Edge was struck by the scale of the machinery. Massive conduits hummed with energy, their surfaces glowing faintly. "All right," Edge muttered, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see what we're working with." He grabbed a toolkit from a nearby station and began examining the power relays. Years of experience guided his hands as he identified the components he needed to modify. The room vibrated with the ship's groaning protests as the null's assault intensified. "This is insane," the technician muttered, watching Edge work. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and you're trying to fix this with a wrench." Edge grinned without looking up. "Wrenches solve more problems than you'd think." As he worked, the ship shuddered again, and sparks flew from a nearby console. Edge swore under his breath, his hands moving faster. He rerouted power lines, bypassed safety protocols, and adjusted the shield frequency. The null's corrosive nature was unlike anything he'd encountered, but he had learned long ago that even the impossible could be outsmarted with the right angle. "Done," he announced, stepping back from the console. He grabbed the comm unit on his wrist. "Aegis, tell Iridia to activate the shields. I've modulated the frequency. Should give them a bit more kick." Aegis's voice came through clear and steady. "Acknowledged. The captain is deploying the updated shields now." Edge held his breath as the generator room hummed louder, the energy building to a crescendo. Then, a ripple of light coursed through the walls, and the ship seemed to steady. The alarms quieted, replaced by a low, steady hum. "They're holding," the technician said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The shields are actually holding." Edge exhaled and wiped his brow. "Told you, wrenches fix everything." Before he could celebrate further, the comm crackled again, this time with Iridia's voice. "Kale, report to the command deck immediately. The Null are adapting, and we need your input." Edge groaned. Of course, they're adapting. Nothing's ever easy. As he sprinted back toward the command deck, his mind raced with possibilities. The Null were relentless, but so was he. If they wanted to play the game of adaptation, he'd show them just how stubborn a human mechanic could be. And he wasn't about to let the galaxy down, the mind of the enemy. The command deck was a frenzy of activity when Edge stormed in, his boots pounding against the floor. Technicians barked status updates, holographic displays flickered with chaotic data streams, and Captain Iridia stood at the center like a storm's calm eye, issuing commands with unyielding precision. "You're late," she said without looking at him, her focus locked on a swirling mass of Null forces on the central display. "Had to save your ship first," Edge shot back, stepping beside her. "What's the situation?" Iridia gestured to the display. "Your shield modifications worked, but the Null are shifting their strategy. They've concentrated their attacks into focused tendrils. They're trying to punch through instead of wearing us down." Edge studied the projection, his mind racing. The Null weren't mindless. They were adapting faster than any algorithm he'd seen. Their chaos wasn't random. It was reactive, deliberate, and terrifyingly efficient. "They're testing us," he muttered, "learning our defenses so they can tear them apart." Iridia nodded grimly. "And we don't have much time. If they breach our core, the fleet is finished." Edge scratched his chin, his thoughts tumbling over each other. The Null didn't behave like any threat he'd faced before. They weren't just consuming. They were analyzing, evolving. He glanced at the holographic tendrils slamming against the shields, their movements almost hypnotic. "Wait," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the din. "What if we're looking at this wrong? They're not attacking. They're communicating." Iridia turned to him, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Explain." Edge gestured to the display. "Look at the patterns. They're not just brute forcing their way in. These movements, they're probing, like a nervous system sending signals. They're feeling us out." Iridia folded her arms. "And how does that help us?" Edge's mind raced. "If they're communicating, then they have to have a network. Something coordinating their actions. We disrupt that network, and we disrupt them." Iridia frowned. "Their network would be incomprehensible. They're not like us." "Doesn't matter," Edge said, his voice gaining urgency. "Every system has vulnerabilities. If we can isolate their central node, or whatever's giving the orders, we can hit them where it hurts." Iridia hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. How do we find it?" Edge grinned despite himself. "That's the easy part. Aegis." The ship's voice responded immediately. "Yes, Edge. Can you track the Null's energy signatures? Look for a central point, something bigger, stronger, or more erratic than the rest." "Scanning," Aegis replied. The room was silent for a moment, save for the hum of machinery, before she spoke again. "There is an anomaly near the fleet's edge. Its energy readings are off the scale. It appears to be the source." Iridia pointed to the display. "Get it on the map." A new projection appeared, highlighting a massive, pulsating entity hovering just beyond the Concord fleet. Unlike the other Null forms, this one was almost still, its tendrils moving in slow, deliberate waves. "That's it," Edge said, his voice low. "The brain." Iridia's lips thinned. "If we destroy it, the rest might collapse." "Might," Edge echoed, glancing at her. "Or they'll go berserk. Either way, we don't have a choice." Iridia turned to her crew. "Prepare the fleet for an offensive maneuver. Focus fire on that anomaly." Edge shook his head. "Hold on. If that thing is their brain, it'll have defenses we can't even imagine. Throwing ships at it is suicide." "Then what do you suggest?" Iridia snapped. Edge grinned. We take it out from the inside. The room fell silent. You're suggesting we board it? Iridia asked, her voice incredulous. Not we, Edge corrected. Me. Get me close enough, and I'll figure out the rest. Iridia stared at him as though he'd lost his mind. That's insane. Probably, Edge admitted, but it's our best shot. Iridia hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but you'll need support. I've got Aegis, Edge replied. She's all the support I need. Before Iridia could argue, the ship shook violently. The Null were intensifying their assault, and time was running out. Get to the Aegis runner, Iridia ordered. We'll cover your approach. Edge nodded and turned to leave, but Iridia's voice stopped him. Kale. He glanced back. Don't die, she said, her tone softer than before. We need you. Edge smirked. Wouldn't dream of it. He sprinted back to the Aegis runner, the corridor shaking around him as the Null's attacks grew more ferocious. When he reached the ship, Aegis was already powering up, her interior glowing with readiness. Ready for a crazy idea, Aegis? Edge asked as he strapped into the pilot's seat. I was designed for them, she replied smoothly. The ship launched from the dreadnought, weaving through the chaos with unmatched agility. Edge's heart pounded as the Null's central entity loomed closer, its massive form pulsing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. All right, Edge muttered, gripping the controls. Let's see what makes you tick. The Aegis runner dove into the heart of the beast, its pilot ready to gamble everything on one last impossible plan.